We're going to go ahead and get started. I know all of you attending here today, but I'd still like to introduce myself for those who are watching this on video. My name is Keith Zoromski. I'm serving as the Social Science Division Chair, but right now I'm also serving as the Title III Curriculum Specialist and Activities Director, and hence providing these opportunities for the college on behalf of the Title III grant. Last week we talked about increasing instructional effectiveness in the traditional setting. Today we'll be talking about increasing instructional effectiveness in the online and flex setting. So when I say the flex setting, I'm meaning the part of the component of the class where we're not meeting on ground. That would be on Blackboard, essentially half of an online class, and then a distance education learning opportunity. So we're going to start off with an introduction here, some background information, the honest truth, and the objective for this presentation. As you know me, there's one thing you may not know about me, but I was an online student. I'm of the generation that received graduate credit online. It was kind of a flex hybrid program where my master's group still met in person once a semester, or we'd have a week-long institute in the summer, but I have the unique position of having been the student, so I know what both sides are like. Some of my colleagues say they've never been the student, they've only been the instructor. So part of it is, when we talk about servant leadership, it's being more empathetic than sympathetic, is you might be sympathetic to their circumstances that keep them from doing their online work, but having been an online student myself, I look at this as what barriers did I have that were either put upon myself by myself or maybe created as a difficulty on the instructional end. So with that, the honest truth is, I am not here to tell you what to do. This is my way or the highway, this is the way you have to do it. Different instructors, different courses, different subject areas are all going to apply differently online. My hope is, though, to plant some seeds of advice, some ideas that even if you go today and using the checklist you've been given that chronologically follows through the presentation, it can be an affirmation. I already do that. That's a good point. Didn't realize that this was a best practice. Or it can be I hadn't considered that. You leave it as a blank and you go back and you check it off when you're working on your Blackboard courses, even currently or for the next semester. So our goal is to share some ideas that may just help enhance what you're already doing. Really, the percentage of those who are enrolled in Flex or online only continues to rise. The objective here today is as stated. We want to make sure your either online or Flex courses have a really rewarding personal element that, yes, can be a challenge to implement. Distance-wise, you don't see them, or Flex-wise, you only see them half the time. But it can be a rewarding experience for students and instructors alike. So we're going to look into three things with online education: rigor, relevance, and relationships for these students enrolled in these online or flex courses and for the instructors who facilitate them. So let's go ahead and start with our next part, creating rigor. We have a few things that we'll be hitting on here today. And with your checklist, you can go through, and as we're talking about each thing and I explain further, make note, check it off, or keep it as an action item that you may want to consider. Expectations are researched to be one of the strongest indicators for student success. You can take out income levels. You can take out background. You can take out family education levels. The instructor's expectation is one of the highest indicators of student success. But that doesn't mean we don't have our challenges. So if you're able to kind of create a culture of no excuses from the beginning, you're really able to set that standard of this is the expectation for this course. That you want to be fair and consistent, but look, there are no excuses in this class within these means. But you got to front load that. So one thing that I like to do is in the introduction, or in an email, or in a short assignment, or something else, ask students right up front, how are you going to manage your time for this course? Do you have a backup plan if your computer web access doesn't work? Those seem to be the issues of, well, my job, I had overtime, or I didn't have access to it. And instead of troubleshooting with them in week 6, you're asking them to figure that out ahead of time. That's also a citation of, well, you told me that you could go to your neighbor's house should you not have computer access. I'm sorry that you didn't complete it on time. If you put this on the students up front, it allows them to strategically think through ahead of time. And for that first semester student or that student who's never had an online course, this tells them this is going to be part of your responsibility. In fairness, first generation, first time online student may have not considered this. So putting that up front, that you're not necessarily asking them to write out a page of a support plan, but it's asking them, what are you going to do? By putting these questions up front, students are forced to problem solve and be prepared for circumstances even before they arise. Here's another perspective. Past students. We know students talk. They'll say, oh, don't take Mr. Zoromski's class, he gets off subject all the time. Or take Mr. Zoromski's class, he uses some pretty funny videos that I learned from. They talk. Well, in an online class, why can't we foster that? We can bring in advice from past students. I like to, in the end, in the last discussion chapter, have a post, what's something that you could tell a future student? Now, this is easy for me in a history class because we can kind of end and wrap up with that, but it's you get some honest feedback, and you'll get students that were very successful or not as successful who take advantage of this. And they'll say things like, keep up with the reading and you'll be great. Or, I had a slow start, but once I figured this out. Or, the instructor's feedback really does help you to get more points. Then you take that and you share that with the students in the next semester, whether in a discussion board that they can or can't post in, and then they can read that. You can change the names or just give them initials or something else, but when they see it and you don't reformat their writing, and they can tell this isn't the instructor saying this, students kind of have a heads up. And it's honest advice from their peers. Students who are anxious about the course then, in a way, have immediate support from students who have already been there. To continue the cycle, then you can have the opportunity for those students at the end of the semester to do so. So we're having rendezvous with peers, rendezvous with the instructor. We want to have a rendezvous with information. Students often need a reason to seek information. If you're not telling them that it's for a grade or for a point, they're not going to say, I would like to look in more about the War of 1812. This is fascinating to me. It's I'm going to follow the path of least resistance and do what's needed. So if you front load this and create a scavenger hunt over the course schedule, the syllabus, the different options in Blackboard, and you put this up front, students then, in a way, answer the most frequently asked questions. One semester I did this where I just went through my emails. What are students asking the most about? How many posts are we supposed to do? What's the textbook? Those kind of common questions. I've made an assignment. I've differed between making an assignment or making it extra credit. When it's extra credit, they don't always take advantage of it. But it's something where it's 10 points out of 1,000. In the big scheme, you're helping a student to round up a grade. But through this, you're helping them answer the most frequently asked questions and start off hitting the ground running. And when they have 10 points extra credit, and on that first discussion board they don't get all the points, it's kind of a way of letting them wade in and not be in a hole to start off. Whether initial assignment or extra credit, students become engaged and familiar with the information. They can have to look into things about you, where this is at, and tell you something. And this isn't a junior high, what's the picture on page 17 of the textbook? But it is something that, well, if you ask them a question relating to the textbook, you know that they have to have it that way. Or it's how many posts are you supposed to have by this date at this time? Then they have to consider what they're supposed to do. They're having to check the schedule. One thing that students are either very successful at or really struggle with is taking feedback from an instructor. We've had those students who they read what you have to say, they do it, and they earn more credit. We have a lot of students who just keep doing the same thing. What I found is that a lot of those students aren't even reading the feedback. They see their grade, okay, that's what I got, and they keep doing the same thing. With this, corrective feedback can improve student achievement. That's not rocket science. We're aware of this. But good feedback is wasted if students don't read it and act upon it. Well, we can't physically say, hey, Ike, you need to go and read this. I'm going to come to your house and make you read it and talk to me about it. We can put a catch-22 on there to make sure that they are reading it. So if you use a feedback code or other means of identifying that students read feedback. So, for example, on the end of my feedback for the first discussion board, what I now do is put something like KZ818. It's my birthday, August 18th. Or I'll put something funny like America, or just something to short. That then is the code for the password on the first quiz. Meaning they can't take the first quiz if they haven't read the feedback. And I tell them this It's in the syllabi, it's an announcement, it's texted out. You still get those students going to take it last minute, contacting you, but you have front-loaded this, that in the first week or two, you've taught them, you got to read this feedback to see this, and then it becomes part of the habit. You can make that an assignment, you can make it a short extra credit, or you can make it the password on a next assignment, but it's your way as an instructor of, within your circle of influence, having some control of saying, no, I know you didn't read the feedback because you didn't do this. With that code, you're having them do that. I will warn you, the first time you do this in the first semester, it's the fact that you'll have a handful of students that won't do it, and they're in a flurry to contact you. But the way I look at it is I'd rather them contacting me early than not reading the feedback weeks in. With an online course, or even with a flex where they're only seeing their peers half of the time, we don't always create those relationships with the peers that we might in a traditional class. Now, we know that most online, well, all of our online courses and most of our flex have weekly discussion posts with responses. It's meant to replicate the conversation we have in class. Students become engaged when the discussion is student-led rather than just the instructor pure lecturing. Well, if you can do something, anything at all, to make sure students don't just tune out after the minimum amount of postings, you're able to achieve a higher level of engagement. Oftentimes it's, I did my 2 responses, I did my 3 applies, I'm done, Tuesday, I'm out. And then they don't get on until next week. One thing to do is, well, hey, I'd like you to review a classmate's comments. You got to, when they replied to you, and submit a revised one. That's your assignment for the week. Or have the edit option open and available for students to go back and make changes. Or then, in a review week, go back and take a post and further add to it. This way, it's not just a teach, test, hope for the best, you're on your own correspondence type course. It's a truly collaborative effort. This encourages students to even consider editing advice. Now, you don't want to make it where they're the teacher and it's saying, hey, Jimmy, use capital letters. But it is something that through peer revision, then the level of expectation of authored posts only increases. You want to be involved as an instructor, but you can't make it so minimal that there's no response time for students. Have this post on Tuesday, have the revised one on Wednesday. It's not realistic. With these students, they're taking it for the flexibility of time. But if you're looking for a matter of days or within the week or after week 1 or something else, you're able to kind of thread that needle of what works for your schedule as an instructor for scope and sequence and what works for their flexibility as a distance learner. So some other examples include actual examples. No matter the course basis, examples are very helpful. A majority of students are visual learners, so when they can see what they're supposed to do, it makes sense. I think of this when I first got married, and here's a shocker. I folded towels wrong. I was a bifold kind of guy. But my wife taught me that the proper way to take up less space is a trifold. And she would keep telling me this, and I kept getting it wrong. And I finally said, can you just show me? And once I saw her folded in that way, our closet looks like a Bed Bath & Beyond. They're all just nicely folded in there. But I had to see that. So we have this expectation is, hey, I've given you a rubric, and that's helpful, but what about an actual example? My online class, what I will do is, within the course information, is actually provide an example sheet. So when they go to course information, and they'll have their traditional syllabus, schedule, rubric, but they also have a discussion post example. And this will show them exactly what may earn certain points. So I give a question. Do you believe that Ronald Reagan was a successful president? Why or why not? I've changed that to be effective president. It kind of makes it less ambiguous. And I have 0-point examples. Yes, I believe he was a successful president. I agree with you, Nathan. Well said, wink face. I didn't know Ronald Reagan was a president. Laugh out loud. OMG, you go, girl. I wish I could like this post. Some of us may laugh, but if you've taught even for 1 semester, you get those posts. That's not a college-level contribution. Now, I don't punish students for saying those, but they're not graded and they're not earning any credit. And if that's one of your 5, you're not getting any credit. But they see that. Okay, here's a 1-post example. He was successful because he helped win the Cold War and brought down the Soviet Union. Hey, this reminds me of Miracle on Ice. Go USA. Okay, there's some historical truth there, but you're not explaining, you're not demonstrating that you've connected to the text, you're just kind of going off of pop culture, or that's what a Google response might have said. But you did contribute something, but the word count's way low, so you get 1 point. Now, I won't read all of these, but as you can tell, then there's a 2-point example. The word count goes up, there's something specific. There's a 3-point. And if they look, now there's a reference to something in the textbook. There's a 4-point. Oh, it's all information, but we need more of their opinion. There's a 5-point. Oh, it's their opinion and historical information and the word count and the rubric, and then they see that. Now, part of it is, I also give an above and beyond example. Now, some colleagues are like, well, you're telling them that's what they have to do. No, but you do have those students that want to know, well, how can I go above that? Or, hey, if you're aiming for the above and beyond and you don't get something, chances are you're not going to then lose points if that's what you were aiming for. So by doing this example, it allows students to see exactly what you, as the instructor, are expecting. Some classes that's easier than others, but a student can't say, I don't know what you want from me. So in sharing your own positive examples, you can even have past student examples. Here's what a student said to this prompt, and they can see it. Now, you often don't want to make it something about that actual conversation, because then they just end up paraphrasing what that fantastic student from the past said. In doing this, you remove names, but then they can see from a student's perspective, this was authored by a student from a past semester, this would get you full credit. It gives them an example, and those who are new to online courses can get in and see. I'll also make note where I'll comment or make a reply of, hey, those of you new to online education, Savi's post here is exactly what we're looking for. She may or may not earn full credit for FERPA purposes, but meets the rubric expectations. You're not sharing grades, but you're saying, students, if you're looking for an example, here's one to go off of. And you want to talk about walking a little taller, those students then, if you email them that or something else, it's like the teacher used mine as an example, then you have that immediate engagement and that connection in the class. Or let's say you use their paper using primary sources of the Titanic sinking, that stays with them for a while. A long time, there you go. So, hypothetically speaking. Now, with student feedback, we will get our TK20 reports at the end of the semester, and then it's usually a, hey, let's read this, and then okay, but by then you may already have your class done, already set, or anything else. You don't have to wait to receive student feedback. One thing to consider is by beginning or stopping doing or continue doing or changing some results based on student input. Now, Blackboard does give options for anonymous surveys, or you can make it a halfway through, what do you think you're doing well, what is something you would like to see in the class, or something like that. And you can ask, hey, future students in this, what would they do? You can ask them that halfway through, and you can try to implement that. So you can make subtle changes, not saying, okay, now we're going to have 5 exams, or we're going to make these all quizzes, but it's a, hey, I wish that this was aligned with the textbook, or there were more videos, or it seems that some chapters are heavier than others, things that you can control even behind the scenes as you go through. So all of that was to make further rigor. Not necessarily more assignments or more difficult, but your rigor is based on what are you expecting them to do. So if they have a rendezvous with the instructor, with their peers, with information, you're furthering their ability to dig down deeper in depth of knowledge. But a lot of students don't have an interest in class because they don't feel it's relevant. For me, teaching history, there's a lot of students who are like, I'm only taking this to graduate. This is all in the past. How is this relevant to me? So with relevance, we're going to talk about Socratic questioning, open-ended questioning, some modern examples, and choice and creativity. Socratic and open-ended questions are easier in some classes than others. If you have computer applications, there's only so many ways to ask, how could you use this in your future career? I understand that. But as most of our classes are general studies, liberal arts, there are different ways that we can ask questions that you can't just type into Google and get a response because it's so open-ended, it's so Socratically asked, a student genuinely has to answer for themselves. So Socratic questioning dives deeply into topics and class content, and that's something is, do I include these? With questions that have further depth of knowledge, is it a, who was the first president? Okay, that's easy to find. We're not really asking them to think anything. Is it a question that you could change to, was there another candidate in 1786 that would have been more well-suited than George Washington? Yes, you'd have to defend that. No, you have to defend that as well. You type that in, you're not going to get an answer in Google. You're going to get stuff about George Washington, stuff about the election, where students have to actually look into the information. So question prompts that can be answered yes or no, even with supporting details, just stifle conversation. There's nothing else to be said. Nobody wants to talk about that. Open-ended questions allow for essentially unlimited discussion or until your discussion week ends and you stop that. So here's some examples from geography. You're studying a topic, unit on Europe. If you could travel to any European country, where would you go and why? The opportunities are endless. A student may say, well, I would like to go to Zoromski, Poland, because that's where my ancestors came from. Or I would like to go to Normandy, France, because I really enjoy studying World War II. Or I'd like to go to England because I find the monarchy just fabulous and fantastic and interesting. Now those are pretty short answers, but it's the fact that a student's still going to have to demonstrate knowledge within the continent that you're studying at that time. As a United Nations official, what would you do to curb Somali pirating? Dozens of examples there too. It's the fact that they have to understand Somali pirating, they have to understand the role of the United Nations officials, and be able to gauge that within the conversation. This also opens up for students agreeing or disagreeing with each other, which we can agree upon. College is meant to broaden your horizons, make you more well-rounded, and see other perspectives. So some modern examples. Students don't often have a background with the past, and that's obviously history, but that's even a lot of our subject areas. No, I haven't been a paramedic before. I've put a Band-Aid on my cousin. That's about it. I have some experience with biology, but, I've never dissected a frog. Well, are there ways with more modern or relevant or examples that they've gone through that students will be able to relate? So let's say you're asking about the election of 1896. Who knows? Who cares? It's a long time ago. All those people are dead. Well, compared to 2016, hey, that was the first election I voted in. You got to understand both, but then it has an instant connection to them. They may not know who Harriet Beecher Stowe is, but they've read all the Harry Potter books. Harriet Beecher Stowe was the J.K. Rowling of her day. Okay, there's an instant connection to that. The 1900 Galveston hurricane, not familiar, but they lived through the 2011 Joplin tornado. If you're able to find something that's modern, relevant, a character, a story, a movie, you have a connection and a foothold into their interest and what they're aware of. We like choices. I remember when the Russian premier came to the United States in the 1950s and was going and touring with Vice President Nixon. And the one thing he said that fascinated him the most, that was the biggest difference between communist Russia and the United States, was the American grocery store. Because in Soviet Russia, it was here's your rice, here's your beans, here's your cereal. Where in the United States, we have a whole aisle for cereal. We have a half aisle for beans. We have a half aisle for rice. There's different choices. Part of that's the capitalistic model, but part of it is we've been raised that we want to have choices, and if you think about it, for student-directed learning, letting them choose what they want to focus on only makes it more relevant. Now, part of that is, well, they're going to pick what's easiest, or they're going to pick maybe something that doesn't tie to this. That's where we're going to talk about the illusion of choice. It's a psychological term that all of us have done with children at one point. I'll tell my daughter, you can either get your reading step in, or you can practice the piano. Which would you like to do first? Guess what? She's doing both that night, but what does she think she got to do? Choose. I have two outfits. Which one would you like to wear today? I chose what outfit she was wearing, but she had the choice. There's no argument, but there's an investment in that. So as instructors, sometimes we will just give, here's the discussion prompt for this week, talk about it. And even if you do the option where you can't view others' posts until you've authored your own, they often look a lot alike. They're going from the same textbook or same web resource. It's not a conversation. So what I do in my class is I'll have 8, 9, or 10 choices. And I'd like to show you this real quick to give you an idea that may be an option for your courses. Now, this is a closed class from the past semester, so please ignore the closed and the dates and everything else. But let's say we want to discuss Chapter 18, the Progressive Era. You'll notice that there are 9 different topics, all key topics from what we would talk about. If this was a traditional class, I wouldn't pose one question to the class and then dismiss. We're going to talk about these 9 different things over 1 or 2 classes. And think about your traditional classes on ground. Are students answering every single question? You might have that one really good student that's constantly raising their hand and everybody else is looking to copy off of. But a lot of times it's somebody chiming in over here, somebody chiming in over here, somebody chiming over here. Why can't the online discussion be the same way? Where you pull test information from all of them, but students can read and see from these. So students can reply to, in my class, any 2 that they choose. So essentially, they have to answer 1/4 of them straight up, and they have to reply to 3 others. But they get to choose what they want to talk about. This allows for a student, when we're talking about the Roaring Twenties, and their grandfather ran a speakeasy off the Neosho Square, to chime in with that. But if I had just given them a question about, the conservative comeback of the 1920s, they might not have had a chance to bring that in. So allowing that type of choice makes it much more relevant for students when it's then discussing what they want to, but it's an illusion of choice because I've already designated what topics that I would like them to discuss. Creativity. Sometimes we get into this is what I did last semester. With extra responsibilities and extra time, it's difficult to keep piling on and trying something new. Well, with the discussion board or with some of these assignments where it's just answer these questions, what can you do to go beyond that and still achieve your instructional goal, but at the same time, further their depth of knowledge? For example, yes, we have our assigned reading, but is there an article, something recent, something that came out that you can post and have questions about that, or an open-ended discussion that makes it much more relevant for students when it was just published by fill-in-the-blank publication last week? Audio. Could you have an audio prompt? It's a listen to this and determine fill-in-the-blank. Listen to this speech by this person. Listen to this 911 call and interpret what you would have to do. Listen to this lecture by this person. Listen to anything else. Students don't even buy CDs anymore. Best Buy announced that they're getting rid of CDs. They are used to downloading and listening to music. Why aren't we meeting them halfway with this? Video. It's engaging to students. Most students, if they don't know something, go to YouTube and type it in. I was trying to fix a dishwasher, and I typed in my problem, and there was a YouTube video that taught me how to fix it. It's the type of thing that for every subject we teach, somebody's made some kind of YouTube video that's relevant, rigorous, and many times interesting to students. Now, I do caution you not just to look at the title and then show it, something to preview. Sometimes it's only half of it, and they want you to subscribe or something like that. But it's the fact that then students, on their break at work, can watch a video, and they're studying, but not having to be fully committed to an extended amount of time. Images. Why just discuss World War II propaganda when students can find their own and share? Hey, I want you to find one and share one that wasn't in the textbook and interpret it. Make it a contest. The one who finds one that the instructor hasn't seen, or I've done a 1920s photo contest. Whoever finds the most unique and connects it to our studies gets 5 points extra credit. It's the type of thing that it might be subjective, but you get a lot of posts in that discussion because students are enticed and it's interesting to them, but it connects back to what they're studying. So one thing I did in my political science classes was for campaigns, it's not just saying, here's how campaigns work and this is what they do. It's okay, you're planning my campaign. What would you have? Well, we'd have these posters and we'd have, Z is the key, and we'd go to here and we'd play off of this, but we wouldn't tell people about this. And then, and it's the fact that their depth of knowledge now, campaigns work, goes very deep because they're actually, in a way, creating one without me just saying, tell me about campaigns. So our fourth part is in creating relationships. With relationships, well, it all starts with your introductions, making personal connections, and your demonstration of interest throughout the course. Think back to whenever you had a first date with somebody, whether it be a spouse or even, a relationship that didn't work out. And on that first date, you wanted to share certain things and learn certain things about them, you know, with parameters, of course. Well, really, your introduction to students is in a similar way. Of course, not that you're dating your student, but it's you get one chance to make a first impression. If it's hi, my name is, you know, Bill Smith. I studied at Iowa State University, and I've been at Crowder since 1997. Does a student really learn anything about you that wouldn't show up in a Google search? Do they know what kind of person you are? If that was your first date, would you want to get to know them any better? So it's the fact that, you know, if they know what you teach in your education level, it's really difficult to make a personal education. Where we studied and where we have degrees from doesn't mean the same to students who haven't achieved that yet. They want to see, what do we have in common? I'm a Detroit Tigers fan, I like to do Civil War reenactments, and I have an almost 6-year-old daughter. So now I have, I like baseball. Hey, my uncle does, you know, Confederate reenacting. I have a 4-year-old daughter. What's that like as they get older? So right there, you've tried to connect with them. So if you include family, hobbies, fun facts, and other personal information, within reason, students see instructors more personably. We do this within our staff information tab per our Crowder guidelines. So when we go to your course, most of us have, for staff information, and I replaced my picture with a avatar there, and it's essentially, in a way, a CV. So I do say some of my accomplishments to achieve, like, hey, you know, I do know this area, but I make sure to tell them about personal interest and, you know, wife and daughter Hadley and and everything else too. And when you do that scavenger hunt assignment, you put a question from that so they have to read through it. It's something that if you just saw 2 lines, history instructor, Crowder College, doesn't look like the instructor's invested, you don't really learn anything about them that you didn't already know. So with this, right or wrong, students do make their own determinations whether they like or dislike a course, really within a matter of a few logins. It's kind of like that traditional class. Students are in there sitting, and you walk in, they're making judgment decisions. It's just how the human mind works. I walk into a class, and people are like, are you old enough to teach history? Or it's that guy's clothes don't match, or why is he wearing a tie? It's what you say, they're starting to make judgment decisions. It's how we operate psychologically. So this is the same with online classes. In a flex, you'll meet them first, and then you have more of a control of that first impression. But while it's extremely front heavy, at the beginning of the semester, try to make a connection with every single student very quickly. They do the introduction, reply to every single student. I not only reply, but I copy that reply and I email it to them. That way, if they don't log back onto the introduction, they see that it's something else. And yeah, it takes a while. Hey, I also did this. I went here. Tell me more about this. Some will reply, some won't, but it's the fact that they're like, he read my introduction. He's doing this. Okay. He sees me as not just a Crowder ID number, but as an individual. So one thing I might say, Chris, I read in your introduction that you are a Kansas City Royals fan. I am too. For the record, I am not, but I had to get a reasonable explanation here. Hopefully our season is better than last year. I look forward to working with you in class. Have a great semester. They know I like baseball. They know I read it. You make a connection to it. It's more personal than just a reply post of, hey, thanks for the introduction. It's taking time to show you care. So they may say, this class is hard. The instructor's engaged. And that's often enough to keep them from immediately, I can't handle this, I'm going to drop it, because they know they have an open channel with you. And that's a part of demonstrating interest. Students are insightful. They talk, they see, they know which classes are on autopilot, they know which classes they can get away with things, they know which class of, they're reading this. They know an instructor is tuned out or really has a passion for that content. Within my division, Mr. Ron Cole replies to every single student post. I don't know how he does it. I personally pick and choose, just like in a conversation. There's multiple ways to do it. But students know he's engaged in this. He's replying to every single one of us. One thing that I do use is the Remind app. The Remind app allows you to not only send reminders, hey, quiz due by whatever tonight, but it also allows you to communicate with students individually via text without even having to look up or know their number, and having then a documented conversation so nobody can say, well, you said I could take this longer, or they were harassing me, or anything like that. So with the Remind app, You don't even have to use it on your phone. You can go to the website www.remind.com, and it's run by Google now. They're buying up everything. And the students, they sign up for it by texting a message to a number, and then they're in it. Most students now have used this in their high schools. A majority of the country's high schools are using this. A majority in our service area, their high schools, different teachers in different classes are using it. But what I might say is, yes, hey, it's Thursday, don't forget that this deadline's coming up, but I can actually have a conversation. So let's go to this student that we'll call Rusty Gill. And I can actually message Rusty individually. We have not heard from you in class this week. Just wanted to make sure that all was well. Drop me a line if I can be of any assistance. Reply back, hey, sorry, it's been a busy week, but I'll be doing my post and quiz tomorrow. Thanks for checking in. And they did it. Now, some colleagues will call this hand-holding, and I can see that perspective. But I also see it as, if I don't have something turned into academic affairs, they're not just going to say, no, don't worry about it, or immediately harp on me. It's a, do you need help getting that turned in? Everything okay? What can we do for you? But when you do this, you can do blanket reminders. You can individually contact a student. I can go to the grade book and see who hasn't done it, and it's due within 24 hours, and just pick those students and say, hey, this is due today. These students communicate more by text than by email. Email for them is something that you do in the professional workplace. They had an account. They're supposed to check it in college, but they check and respond to their text messages quicker and sooner. So in a way of trying to help them to not miss deadlines, because we're trying to prepare them to be successful, is one way to communicate with them. And if you take Speech 101, one of the first lessons is know your audience. That's our audience. And I'm not saying we have to play to them, but we have to address them as how they learn, how they operate within their communication norms. Part of this is, as highly educated instructors, we all have connections to our area. We got into biology, paramedic sciences, history, other subjects because we have a calling for it. We have a love. We have an interest for it. When students know that, it's contagious. It's the fact that they're like, they really like this. They feel passion. When they say, no, this is what you need to know for your career field, they mean it. With history, for me, it just comes naturally. It's the fact that I can share, hey, we're talking about the Senate. Here's the time when I met a former U.S. Senator, fill in the blank, and go from there. Or, hey, don't forget, today's voting day, and I already helped you find where the voting places are in this and this area. Teaching about the Civil War, we're talking about the first shots fired at Fort Sumter. Hey, here's me at Fort Sumter. Wow, you looked a lot younger and had more of a hairline. And I'm like, -5 points. But the fact is, they're like, well, wait, tell me about that wall, or that looks thick, or what was there. You're telling them from personal experience, and they're more engaged, they're more interested. It's more of storytelling than lecturing. So with this, in conclusion, we have talked about wanting to promote rigor, relevance, and relationships. By proactively preparing your classes to be appropriately rigorous, systematically relevant, and by forging relationships with your enrollees, both students and instructors benefit. There is no perfect online course. This was not to tell you, go back and scrap your online courses. What could you add into it? But rather, they're only instructors who each semester to try to make slight changes to make their class more perfect. It's kind of like the Constitution. In order to form a more perfect union, well, in order to form a more perfect online course, we need to kind of look at it every semester of what can I do. But it's important to look at it from the student's perspective of not, I'm going to make this an easy course. What barriers? What can I do on my end? What is in my circle of influence that I can control? I can't control that they may not log in, but I can certainly track when they are logging in to try to communicate with them. Hey, logging in on Sunday at 11 o'clock is not replicating the time you would spend in class. Try to do this on these days and it may help. It may be those reminders. It may be that personal connection. It may be doing something where it's even calling each student. And that was one of those checklist items that I didn't get to mention with relationships. Each semester I'll go to Genzabar and I write down all their phone numbers. And it is time consuming. And I get a lot of voicemails and a lot of this number's not connected. But I leave a message or I get the student and they are shocked that an instructor will call them for an online course. But on the online evaluations, they're like, he called me. And a lot of times it's a, so how many posts do I have to do? I'm able to take care of that before week 1 is even over. Or it's I'm calling on Wednesday and they haven't logged in yet. Any questions? Ooh, they kind of get going. None of it's meant to be critical. It's meant to say, hi, wanted to see if you had any questions. Half the time I make conversation, half the time I don't get a call back or leave a message or the number doesn't work. But it's the fact too is that I've made that first impression on my terms that I do care, and here's how you get a hold of me, and here's what you do. So if you can promote rigor, relevance, and relationships, just as we do in our traditional classes online, you're going to have a more successful experience as well. Thank you for being here, and I hope you have a great day.